Chapter 9. The next morning, I found that my bags were packed. "Where are we going?" I asked my husband, and he just smiled. When we got to the airport, we went to the gate for Hawaii. We were both ridiculously happy. Never before or since have I experienced that particular level of being in love. It was so strange and wonderful to look at this beautiful man and think, husband. We're married, we kept reminding each other. How insane is that? And then we'd go off giggling again. He always laughed about the fact that people often mispronounce my name like Mayte. So when the flight attendant leaned in and said, "Mayte?" we both cracked up laughing till we had tears in our eyes. We asked for virgin Maytes because we were trying to get pregnant and spent the rest of the long flight giggling, napping with our heads together and making out under a blanket. In the limo on the way to the hotel, my husband was doing his best to tease and distract me, but I saw a billboard over his shoulder. Symbol, February 16th, 17th, 18th. "Seriously?" I said. "We're working?" I figured we'd get bored and want to play. Lord help me, he was right. I couldn't even be mad. Michael, Sonny, Tommy, and Morris were waiting to meet up with us at Eurasia, a nightclub in Honolulu. For the rest of the week, we were booked to play at Blaisdell Center, an arena that held about 8,000 people. We rented a boat one day, and he kept me giggling by pretending to be seasick and impersonating people and sneaking videos of some guy's janky old penny loafers. We spent an afternoon communing with dolphins at an aquarium, petting their snouts, imitating their nickering voices, letting them splash us with their tails. And that was amazing. But we really didn't hang around the beach or do tourist stuff at all. We did go to see a local band one evening, and my husband blew their minds by getting up and jamming with them for a while. I love that he did that. It was very rare for him to play someone else's guitar, because he hated using a whammy bar. He was very particular about using foot pedals and having them situated just so. I'm not sure what made him jump up and join in that night. I guess he was feeling happy and light and wide open in a way that was brand new to him. Mostly we spent our days the way we spent all our days on tour. Sleep in as late as possible, head over to the venue for sound check, hair, makeup, warm-ups, go time. If we had any free time, one of us would nudge the other and suggest, "Let's try to have a baby." The second day, my husband started saying, "I wonder if you're pregnant." "Maybe." "I think you're pregnant." "It's possible." "Do you think you're pregnant?" "I don't know. The only pregnant girl I ever knew dropped out of high school." "I need to know. We need one of those tests." He was going to call home and have someone FedEx us a pregnancy test, but I reminded him that they do have drugstores in Hawaii, and we now had the whole entourage in tow, so there would be someone to go get it for us without anyone knowing who it was for. This happened, and the test was negative. But he thought maybe it was so early we would need a blood test. Off we went to a clinic to see a doctor. I felt like an idiot asking for the test. "We're newlyweds," I told the nurse, pretty excited. "It's too soon. You'll have to wait just like everybody else," she said. When I got back to the hotel room, he sighed. "Okay, I guess we'll keep trying." "Fine by me," I said, crawling back into bed with him. This aspect of it was a joy, but honestly, if we'd had any more downtime, he would have driven me nuts with the pregnancy questions. It ended up being the perfect honeymoon for us. Hard to imagine having more fun than we had when we were on stage together. We were doing a lot of music from the Gold Experience, including The Most Beautiful Girl in the World, which sent fans into a fit of ecstasy. We performed it the same way we'd been performing it for the past year and a half, with exacting choreography we worked out together for the World Music Awards. But it was different somehow. He kept referring to me as my wife Mayte. Ah, I thought, that's why it feels so different. Because it is. When we got home, we were right back in the swing of things at Paisley Park. There was a lot going on that winter, which left little time for obsessing over the pregnancy question. We had booked some tour dates and one-off shows and after shows. He was working on music that would become his Emancipation album, celebrating his separation from Warner Brothers. The Spike Lee movie Girl 6 was about to come out with a soundtrack album featuring music by Prince with The Family, Vanity 6, and New Power Generation. There was a movie about Selena in development, and I'd been asked to screen test for it. On a day-to-day level, there wasn't a huge difference in my life. We had worked hard before we were married and kept working hard after. We were still doing what we loved, but now we had a real partnership. Before we had been driving down the same road, now we were on the same bus. He talked to me about finances and asked my opinion about decisions, and I started thinking about things like utility bills and taxes. I was still performing with him, but he was feeling less comfortable with some of my costume options, not loving that his wife was out there in hot pants and bikini tops. Thinking ahead to what I'd do when I did get pregnant and couldn't tour with him for a while, I went to the office and said, "You can take me off payroll since I'm his wife now." A year before that, not in my wildest dreams could I have imagined myself saying the words, "Take me off payroll." And looking back now, I just sigh and shake my head. Baby girl, what were you thinking? I wanted to stay involved, stay productive. I was still on my standing mission to always prove my worth, but it seemed odd to me that I would be paid a salary when I could have anything I wanted. We were in this together, a partnership. We didn't do much sleeping in those days. I remember a lot of work, but it was the kind of work that breeds joy. I heard the piano a lot at all hours of the night and into those creative hours before dawn. I wish I'd had a camera phone back then. It was such a luxury to be sleeping and hear his lavender piano being played just on the other side of dreaming, and then slowly wake up to realize it was him, and he was creating something. He spent most of the time recording and jamming, and through the jamming came songs and more songs. I started cooking for us, mostly what I call love soup, garbanzo beans and lots of veggies, which we eventually started growing in our own greenhouse. I felt like a wife and wanted to be a mother, so I started rethinking my hot pants wearing, stage diving lifestyle. I knew I wanted to get behind the camera, directing and editing music videos, and my husband was totally on board with that idea. "You have that eye," he told me. "You have that sensibility." One night we made plans to go to the Philharmonic and then to see Alanis Morissette afterward. During the symphony, I rested my head on my husband's shoulder and drifted with the music while he breathed against my temple and played with the ends of my hair. During intermission, he made me laugh, doing little sound effects in my ear to illustrate what the people around us were thinking. In the car afterward, I took an Advil, and he asked me if I was all right. Just feeling a little off. He gave me that Scooby-Doo look, ears perking. "Don't get your hopes up," I said. "I think I'm getting my period. First one since going off the pill, so it'll probably be hardcore. But it's good because then I'll be on a predictable cycle." I hated to bail on the Alanis thing, but I could hardly keep my eyes open, so he suggested we go home and watch TV. I went up to the bathroom and was surprised to find I didn't have my period, and my boobs looked bigger. Yes, definitely bigger. I felt a surge of excitement, but I didn't want to get ahead of myself, so I called my assistant and asked her, speaking in Spanish, if she could pop out to the drugstore and get me a pregnancy test. She came back with 4 different tests. I did the first one and didn't even have to wait. The little doodad showed a bright blue plus sign almost immediately. I went to the doorway and called out, "Hey." No response. "Hey!" He muted the TV and said, "What is it? Can you come over here? I'm watching this. Come here, now." He turned away from the TV and I held up the stick. "It's positive," he said. "Are you serious?" I laughed and hugged him, but he wanted to do all the tests. So he set them up like a science experiment on the counter. He looked at the 4 tests, each with their bright, distinctive positives, and said, "We gotta go to the doctor right now." The limo driver was on call just in case we changed our mind about going out again. So by midnight, we were at urgent care. They did blood work, and the doctor offered to do one of those down there ultrasounds with the wand, which we politely declined. The nurse came back with the blood work, and she was smiling ear to ear. "You're pregnant," she said. He hugged me hard, and we laughed for pure joy. "I'm gonna get fat," I said. "Yes, good." He dropped to his knees and whispered something to my belly and then got up and took me by the hand. "Who should we tell?" It was almost 3 in the morning by this time, almost 4 in Miami where Mama was living. He got on the phone with her and said, "What's up, Grandma?" It took her a minute to catch on, but then she was shrieking and crying. We went home, and I made him come in and look at my boobs in the bathroom mirror. Understand, people, I was never a well-endowed woman in that area, and he was always dead set against the idea of me getting my boobs done, so this was a spectacular development, so to speak. He nodded appreciatively. Huge. I know, right? We huddled together in bed, living this perfect moment, knowing we were going to be parents, talking about the things that needed to be learned and done and prepared. We were in those still, creative hours before dawn. The whole house felt full of love and joy and expectation. In the morning, I woke up wanting orange juice. I need to start eating breakfast, I said. I need to start research and planning, and I don't know what all. He was on the phone conducting business, telling people. Cancel the tour. Mayte's pregnant. I could hear their happy voices on the other end of the line. When we walked into Paisley Park, it had become the joyful place in the song. Just happy, happy, happiness everywhere. At my first appointment with the obstetrician in Crystal, Minnesota, the receptionist kept sticking her head out the door and calling, "Mrs. Nelson?" I finally jumped up and said, "Oh, shoot, that's me." They did all the first appointment things and calculated my due date, November 6th, just a week before my birthday. The best birthday present I could ask for, every birthday for the rest of my life. And this confirmed my suspicion that I may have gotten pregnant on our wedding night. The OB flipped through my chart. "I see no reasons to worry," she said. "You're 22, healthy, blood work looks fine. Next time I see you, we might be able to hear a heartbeat." I don't know what compelled me to do it, but on the way home, I impulsively stopped off at a pet store and purchased a puppy, a little female Yorkie. I was trying to decide what to name her and suggested to my husband, "You should put me under and ask me." He stroked my face and whispered me into that deep, meditative space. When I woke up, he told me, "You said her name is Mia." I smiled and said, "Of course, that means mine." At the following appointment, there was the heartbeat, chugging like a little choo-choo. I called my husband at work, hoping he might be able to hear it over the phone, and he said, "I need that machine." "What? The heart monitor? It's a doctor's equipment thingy. It's not for sale." "I want to record it," he said. "Put her on the phone." Half an hour later, I walked out of the doctor's office with the heart monitor and went straight to Studio B. I slathered the goo on my belly and moved the monitor around while he bounced impatiently on a chair. When I caught the exact right location and he heard that little choo-choo chugging away, his face lit up like a neon sign. Thrilled, amazed, scared, but in a good way. He recorded the sound and people told me for years that he walked around with that tape, playing it for anyone who would listen. You can hear it blending into the percussion track on Sex in the Summer. Can't you feel the new day dawning? We were so elated, so thrilled, but looking back, I see this strange undercurrent of, I don't know. Fate and coincidence have their dark sides. Remember the dear old cat Paisley, who'd been around since Paisley Park was built? When I was just a couple months along, she died. My husband was so sad about that, but we got a kitten and named her Isis, and that seemed to cheer him up. We spent a lot of time driving around the lake and Arboretum listening to music, just like we did the very first time I visited Paisley Park. And somehow the car always steered itself toward the shore of Lake Riley, where the Purple House stood. Back in the 80s, with the money from his early success, Prince had built the Purple House, not to be confused with the Purple Rain House in Chanhassen, and he'd had it painted dark purple. Later on, after he built the house where he lived, when I met him, his father John moved into the Purple House. Every time we passed by, I'd gently nudge. "So, your dad lives there now, right?" "Yeah," he'd say, and keep cruising right on by. He'd been estranged from his father for a long time. They really hadn't spoken for 5 or 6 years. It was unusual for my husband to talk about his childhood. But one day, when I was pregnant, he was feeling introspective. A conversation about music led to him reminiscing about his father, and I impulsively said, "I want to go see him." His eyes got wide. "What? You are?" "Yes, this is ridiculous. You're just two people who..." You love each other, but you let your egos keep you apart. I grabbed my car keys and started toward the door, wondering if he would stop me, kind of hoping he would. But he didn't, so off I went. I wanted to unify the family because we were creating one. But all the way over there, I was thinking, crap, what did I just do? I was certain John wouldn't be mean to me in any way, but I had no idea what I was going to say when I pressed the buzzer on the gate. There was a long pause. I decided to count to 30 and then drive away. 25, 26, 27, 28. I jumped when I heard a gruff voice say, "Hello? Hi. Who's this?" "It's your daughter-in-law." "Oh." There was another pause, and then the gate creaked open. As I pulled up in front of the house, he came out. Feeling both butterflies and the baby in my midsection, I got out of the car and hugged my father-in-law. I didn't care if he hugged back, but after a startled second or two, he did. He was clearly taken aback. I knew I had to smother him with love or this was going to go all bad. "I'm holding your grandchild," I told him. He invited me inside and made me a cup of tea. We talked for a little while. Small talk, nothing too intense. Everything that wasn't being said was intense enough. I didn't want to add to it. When I got back in the car a little while later, I called my husband and he picked up immediately. "What happened?" "He was sweet," I said, playing it cool like we were buds now, though that might have been stretching it. "He said he'd come to visit." "He did?" His tone had an unmistakable note of, "I'll believe that when I see it." But a few weeks later, John showed up at Paisley Park. He drove up outside, and my husband did that thing you do when you're trying not to run, but you have to run, and so you end up kind of trotting very fast. He hustled out to the parking lot where his father stood leaning against his car. He was not much taller than his son, and only a little less stylish. I saw the way they hugged each other. That made me hang back so they could talk privately for a few minutes, and then I went out to say hello. John smiled as I approached. "So you got married, huh?" The small talk was a little stiff, but not bad, considering how long it had been since they'd seen each other. "I'm going to go inside," I said, rubbing my arms, pretending I was going in because it was cold. As I walked away, I could hear them laughing and bantering, and it sounded warm and hopeful. But less than 15 minutes after you arrived, John was gone. "What happened?" I asked my husband as he came back to the door. "He said he's going to come by another time." "Well, yay," I said. "Right?" He smiled and nodded. But it didn't happen. I never saw John again. The Purple House is gone now. I heard that Prince had it demolished after his father's death. But when I peeked inside Studio B during my last visit to Paisley Park, I saw John's picture there, and it broke my heart a little. Things started to go sideways not long after that brief visit from my father-in-law. I woke up early one morning and realized my husband hadn't come home. I called the studios, the office, every number I had. He didn't answer. It was an ungodly hour, but I called one of the security people to go check on him. I laid down again, but I had this vaguely off feeling. The security person called me a little while later, speaking Spanish so my husband wouldn't know what they were telling me. They were taking him to the emergency room. They'd found him passed out. There was vomit on the floor. He was saying it was because he took aspirin with red wine, which made 0 sense to me. I ran to the garage and drove to the hospital. At the ER reception desk, I said, "I'm his wife, what's happening?" A doctor came to take me inside. He told me they pumped his stomach and gave him the charcoal treatment they give a person for an overdose. The moment I got inside the room, I threw my arms around him. "What happened? Are you all right?" He jumped off the gurney. Jumped. Like sprang, full of energy like always. "Let's go," he said. I followed him to the car, peppering him with questions. "What were you thinking? Why would you—" "I had a migraine," he said. "I took too many pills." "Too many aspirin?" "Yes." "Why? How is that even possible?" "I don't know. My head hurt." He turned and said to a security person, "Go back and get those records. This is private." On the way home, I sat in the back of the car with my heart pounding, my hands spread protectively over my stomach. I kept saying, "I don't understand this. I don't get it." He kissed my hand and told me not to worry. "It was a stupid mistake," he said, and I accepted that. Yes, it's lame, I look back now and I see a dozen moments like this one. And I want to go back in time and shake this girl by the shoulders and say, "Wake up! Aspirin? Girl, please!" If this had been a daily or monthly or even yearly occurrence, of course I would have been all over it. I would have insisted that he get help, but on a daily basis during the years I lived with him, this seemed like an isolated incident. I was pregnant and vulnerable and hopeful and young, so I accepted his word that it would never happen again. He promised me it wouldn't, and it didn't, so I didn't question him any further. We didn't mention it the next day, or ever. My husband was determined to be clean and healthy and fully present for his family. He went on one of those cleanse regimens where you drink psyllium husk smoothies and colloidal silver. We planned to do a home birth in the big bathtub upstairs. We watched educational videos on natural childbirth and circumcision and nursing, how to bathe the baby, how to burp the baby, how to change the baby's diaper. We both read What to Expect When You're Expecting, but there's really no way you can know what to expect when you see that first ultrasound. We craned into it, fascinated by the murky image of our baby's body, waiting to catch a glimpse of a hand or little toes. We took home a videotape and watched it over and over. "Wait, rewind a little," I said. "Is that what I think it is?" "No. Umbilical cord, that's all." We had agreed we didn't want to be told the baby's gender, but I was certain I could see a little you-know-what between his legs. By the beginning of my second trimester, I had a nice little pooch going. I had a dress with baby printed on it and an arrow pointing down at my belly. He had a shirt that read Baby Maker on the front and BAM on the back. We had them in every color. He also loved wearing my big baggy maternity sweaters. I didn't get morning sickness, but I was tired all the time. "Your body is making a human being," he reminded me daily. I said, "I want to listen to all your music and watch all your movies." He leaned in and whispered to my tummy, "Your mama's crazy." We bought a scale, and I made him get on it first. He weighed 118 pounds. I got on the scale and weighed exactly the same. "It's okay," he said. "I'll muscle. I'm going to weigh more than you by the end of the week." And I did. I packed on several pounds before my next visit to the doctor. "You need to slow down," she said, and I didn't know how to tell her I was eating healthier than a Tibetan monk. My husband was making sure of that. He was urging me to drink soy milk and get my fruit servings and be a vegetarian again. He noticed every change going on with my body and loved it. He couldn't stop kissing and touching and whispering to my belly. When it came time to talk about names, he put me under and asked me, "What is our baby's name?" "Amir," I said. "Amir? It's Arabic for prince." "Amir," he whispered to my belly. "Perfect." "Oh, excuse me? What's that? You saw on the internet that my son's name was Boy Gregory? I hate to be the one to tell you, but a lot of what you see on the internet is fiction. When you're a famous person or a famous person's wife or son, you can't check into a hotel or hospital under your real name because tabloid journalists get wind of that. So when my son was born, I checked into the hospital under the name Mia Gregory. When you have a baby in the hospital, until the birth certificate is filled out, there's an ID on the baby's bassinet or incubator that says boy or girl, followed by the mother's last name. This is how the Boy Gregory thing got started. Someone who had no right to share any information about my family tried to sell a photograph of my son to a tabloid journalist, who saw that label on his incubator and stupidly reported the baby's name as Boy Gregory. To this day, it gets repeated over and over, and it offends and hurts me, because every time I see it, I'm punched in the throat with the betrayal of our privacy on top of the devastating loss of our precious child. While I was pregnant, he gave an interview to Forbes in which he said that he intended to keep the names and genders of his children unknown to the public. He frowned when celebrities sold baby pictures to people or whatever, even if they were giving the money to charity. Fans had stalked and intruded on him in the past. Fans, as in fanatics, not the music lovers and concert goers he referred to as friends. He wanted to keep our children physically safe and well away from the craziness of celebrity, and he wasn't playing. Early in the pregnancy, I bought a charming old-fashioned baby carriage, a prem, they call it in the United Kingdom. And the next day I found it up in wardrobe. My husband had instructed them to cover it with a black tarp. The baby needs sunshine, I said gently. The tarp was not happening, but I did understand his fears about the damage that could be done to a kid by privilege and being in the public eye. We wanted to be normal parents whose normal kids grow up healthy, hardworking, respectful, and kind. At the time, that didn't seem like so much to ask. This next part of my story is very difficult to tell, so please bear with me. It's something I've never shared before, because my husband was extremely protective of our child, and I honored his wishes as long as he was alive. In May, when I was almost 4 months along, we flew to New York for a premiere. Jan came with us, and Mama was flying in so we could all get together for her birthday, which also happened to be Mother's Day. When he and I arrived at the after-party, the club was thick with cigarette smoke. My husband and I looked at each other and shook our heads. I said, "I don't want to be here." "I don't want you to be here," he agreed. "Wait for me in a limo. I'll say hi to my friend and be out in a minute." I knew he did want to be there, though, so I was surprised when he came out in less than 30 minutes, and not so surprised when he said he was going to drop me at the hotel and go back, but surprised again when he returned to the hotel room fairly early. The next morning he told me, "I'm heading home." "What? Now?" I said. "This was supposed to be a family day. It's Mama's birthday. She's expecting you to be there." I was hormonal, vulnerable, insecure, whatever. I didn't take it well. I got angry and cried. After he left, I laid back down and fell into a deep sleep, dreaming strange, dark dreams. We were staying at the presidential suite at the St. Regis in New York, a place we'd stayed many times, and the Fufu folk had been there to make it feel like home for us, so the windows and the French doors out the balcony were sealed shut and covered with foil to keep the room dark enough for sleeping during the day. I was jolted awake by a sudden burst of air and light. I sat up, instantly awake, my heart hammering out of my chest, morning sun in my eyes, cool wind in my face, gradually putting it together that a gust of wind had blown the French doors wide open. Daylight, spring air, and distant traffic noise poured into the dark, silent cocoon. It took me a minute to get my bearings, and then I went out to the balcony and stood there in the midday sun. Below me, Central Park was spread like a bright green blanket. It was a beautiful day. I put my hands on my belly, imagining Amir's tiny body inside mine. I called Mama to come up to the room with Henna. "He left," I told her. "Come up and we'll go get something to eat." When she came up, I was sitting on the sofa. We chatted for a while, and then I got up to go get dressed. "Mayte," her voice was odd, as if she was out of breath. "You're bleeding." I looked at the back of my robe and saw a red stain. I ran to the bathroom. Blood was running down my legs. There was no pain, no contraction, only blood and intense fear. I tried to call my husband, but he was still on the airplane. An ambulance met me at the back door and whisked me to the hospital without a siren. They put me immediately into an exam room, and I waited there, crying. The doctor came and did a down-there ultrasound, and I didn't object. "The good news is the baby's still alive," he said. "What's happening?" I asked. "If the placenta tears away a little, sometimes it can reattach, sometimes not. If it's a miscarriage, you'll know within a few days." "Am I okay to go home?" "Don't travel today. See your doctor as soon as you get home." When I finally got my husband on the phone in the studio, he said, "You'll be okay. You just need rest. You need to come home." The next day I flew home, and we went immediately to the obstetrician for another ultrasound. She said, "I can see where the placenta is starting to tear away." "It's in God's hands," said my husband. I squeezed his hand and said, "Exactly." "We should do an amnio to make sure there's nothing wrong genetically," she said. "Sometimes the body is trying to release the fetus for a reason." She explained what that meant. Long needle, aspiration of fluid, risk of miscarriage. He said, "No, we're not doing that." "The upside is that you know," she said. "You won't sit there and worry." "We won't worry," he said. "We have faith." I wanted to agree. I hated the idea of a test causing a miscarriage. but I was terrified of everything we didn't know. My faith wasn't like his. He had conviction and certainty. I had doubts and questions. I wasn't sure I could live without the answers. When we got home, he got down on his knees and prayed, and I got down on my knees and prayed with him. "We have faith," he said. "We have faith in you. Please bless this child. He's in your hands. I have complete faith. You are everything. We give it all into your hands. We know you won't allow this child to be harmed." We did this every day from that hour forward. His prayers were better than mine. I tried hard to be strong, but sometimes mine went off in the direction of, "Don't you hurt this man who has this great faith in you. Don't you take our baby away. We want this child. We prayed for this child. We'll do anything. We'll be good." Every night, I rubbed vitamin E oil on my belly, and he moved the heart monitor over it until we could hear the comforting sound of Amir's steady heartbeat. We still felt joy every time we heard it. We kept preparing for the baby's arrival. Weeks went by and everything seemed to be all right for the moment. I had terrible headaches, and I continued to swell bigger and bigger, but I was basically okay. I stayed quiet, reading and planning, working on video editing with a private instructor who was teaching me. Every night we prayed on our knees. Every day we listened to the baby's heartbeat. He'd lean in, moving his lips against my belly. "Hey, how's it going?" Whenever he came close, the baby would roll over inside me. We'd burst out laughing at every kick and hiccup. Sometimes my stomach would get elongated and taut. We loved when that happened. "Look, it's stretching its legs. See how strong it is?" A few more weeks went by. My husband wasn't going to LA much anymore, and frankly, I preferred to avoid the place as much as possible. Most of the girls he'd slept with, or who'd wanted to sleep with him, or thought that sleeping with him would do something for their careers, ended up there. I didn't want to be bumping into those girls, and LA itself had always intimidated me. He'd bought a house that wasn't like the pleasant rental houses where I'd first visited him. Maybe because I was pregnant, or I was even more sensitive to it. "This is a single man's house," I said. He nodded. "I'm going to get rid of it." We talked about how our priorities would have to change now that we were parents. I told him I wanted to help support the family. It was important to me, and I was excited to be learning something that could be important to him. Back in Minnesota, he made arrangements to unload the house and ultimately sold it to Raquel Welch, which made us both laugh, because he'd always worshipped her and even went through a phase of wearing the fur boots like the ones she wore in The Legend of Walk's Far Woman. My Raquel moment, the fur bikini from 1,000,000 years BC, seemed very far away now. I was swelling like a beached whale. By September, my back was killing me. I switched from kitten heels to sneakers and followed a strict diet, but my body kept bloating bigger and bigger. The OB told us, "These ultrasound measurements are off. It's possible that we're seeing a form of dwarfism." My husband and I looked at each other and shrugged. "And?" he said. "I'm totally fine with that," I laughed. "That's the least scary thing you've said in months." Of all the possible outcomes that had been offered to us, this was the first one that didn't terrify me. The OB urged us to reconsider the amnio. There are other genetic abnormalities that can be life-threatening. We need to be prepared. "No," my husband said. "We're leaving it in God's hands." The next day I told Mama, "These cramps are kicking my butt. I feel like I'm getting my period." "Go to the doctor right now," said Mama. "It sounds like you're in labor." I grumbled and complained, but with a bit of persuasion, I went. As the OB prepared to examine me, I stopped and said jokingly, "I'm going to stop wearing underwear when I come in. All you ever do is feel me up." She seemed grateful for the opportunity to laugh. I was dilated 2 centimeters, which wasn't that alarming. Braxton Hicks, she figured. No need to worry, but let's stay in touch and start checking in more often. But suddenly my stomach went taut. I said, "Oh, look, it's stretching its legs." The doctor looked down at my stomach, then looked up at me and said, "No, that's a contraction." She hooked me up to a monitor and determined I was in labor. "We need to stop this. We need to check you into the hospital. You're the size you should be at 9 months, but it's too early to deliver, and since we didn't do the amnio, we have no idea what we're dealing with. If there's something wrong, my husband said, it's God's will, not because we didn't prepare. I told you months ago there's something wrong. I'm taking her home. Sir, you're not letting me do my job. She needs to stay in the hospital. I lay there trying to breathe as their voices got angrier and louder. I wasn't in pain exactly, but there was a tightness that wouldn't stop. Let's go, he said to me. She was right behind him saying, she can't go. She's free to do whatever she wants. That's right, Mayte. This is your body. You don't have to go. Please, let's not. If you take her, the OB said to my husband, she'll need to sign a release saying she's going of her own free will, against my advice, saying that you understand she's in danger. I'll sign, I said, in tears because I didn't want to upset my husband, who clearly needed me and our unborn child out of that room. He wasn't used to someone standing up to him like that, and the more disrespected he felt, the more scared I was of the jangling, negative energy swirling around us in that little box of a room. I signed, and we left, but in the car I begged him to take me to another doctor. We went to the closest ER. He waited in the limo so there wouldn't be a scene. I walked in alone and checked in under the name Marlene Gong and said as little as possible. I'm 7 months pregnant. I'm having cramps. They hurried me back and hooked me up to the same machine with the same results. I asked for a second opinion. Another doctor came. I asked for a third opinion. My husband came in. He knew people would see who we were, and it would raise a hassle, but he couldn't stand waiting out there any longer. He wasn't happy because they weren't telling him what he wanted to hear. I wasn't happy because he wasn't happy. But the third doctor was a petite red-haired woman who had a better way with him. She seemed to have an instinct about how to deliver information and make recommendations in a way that didn't make him feel that he didn't have a voice in all this, and his faith wasn't being disrespected. She didn't just tell him, there's no way she'll deliver vaginally. She showed him the measurements and said, this is why it will have to be a C-section. The body can do remarkable things. Yes, but sometimes it needs help. He must have been well and truly terrified by now, because he agreed to have me stay in the hospital on a magnesium drip. I checked into a room under the name Mia Gregory. My husband stayed with me for a long while, singing to a mirror, watching for kicks and hiccups. He put his cheek against my stomach and whispered, you'll be okay. I drifted off to sleep, and when I woke up, Mama was there. Then she left, and I was alone with the mirror and the soft pipping and beeping of the monitor. I stroked my baby and sang to my baby. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy. Days turned to weeks. Weeks stretched to a month. I'd forgotten how hairy my legs could get, not to mention the unmentionable bits that require landscaping. I tried to go take a shower and ended up on all fours in the bathroom. I watched with longing as other mothers checked in, delivered healthy babies, and checked out again. Lying there like a beached whale, I saw on TV that Madonna had a brand new baby. A nurse had to come in and help me struggle to my feet. I don't remember her name. I'll call her Angela, because she always brought this positive, loving energy into the room. She came in every day and said, how's our sunshine? And then she'd put her stethoscope on my belly and smile when Amir kicked at the pressure of her hand. Every day she tried to get me out of bed and into a wheelchair so we could go outside and get some air. She tried to coax me into the pool, but she only ever convinced me to leave the room once, and it was such a weird feeling. I didn't want to do anything but hibernate and sustain the child inside me. I felt fate balanced like a sword on top of my head. I didn't want to do anything to tip it one way or the other. My husband came every day and tried to be supportive, but he was horribly uncomfortable with the idea of me being there week after week. It was actually a relief when he had to go to Japan for a few days. He called me several times a day, and we talked for hours sometimes. I told him, I like this. It's just like when I was 16. He laughed and said, yeah. Those hours were an oasis in all this, a reminder of who we were to each other. While he was gone, the doctors came and told me that there was an injection they could give me to help the baby's lungs mature faster. We know your other half won't approve, they said, but it would be safer if you deliver early, and at the rate you're going, you will most likely deliver prematurely. I felt rotten for doing it without telling my husband. I was crying when I did it, but I did it. He came back, elated with the response to his international promotions for emancipation, which could now live up to its name. The C-section was scheduled a week later on October 16. Thinking like a protective husband and a seasoned showman, he arranged for a plastic surgeon, someone who'd understand that I was a belly dancer whose life and livelihood were in his hands, to come in and oversee the procedure and close me up afterward. The night before the cesarean, my body roared into full-blown labor. They kept trying to drug it down as I lay in agony hour after hour. My husband sat beside me, gripping my hand. The only relief was when he stroked my face and put me under, talking softly in my ear. We're gonna get through this, and everything will be fine. I love you. I'm here for you. Nothing bad is gonna happen. I had requested that Angela be the OR nurse. I needed that positive, loving energy. I laughed when she told me, "That man of yours is gonna have scrubs on." I told him, "You're not in charge here. I am." "No way," I said. "Way," she assured me. They shaved and prepped and carted me in, and I burst out laughing when I saw him in those scrubs with the booties and puffy hat. "You look really cute," I said. "I know." He asked the doctor, "Do all these lights need to be on?" Unfortunately, yes. A burly nurse introduced herself to me and said, "You're going to hate me." It was her job to hold me in a headlock while they did the epidural. "Tell me when it feels like a sore tooth," said the doctor. I said, "What do you mean?" Oh God. Okay, yeah. "Do you feel this? This? How about here?" Yes, I feel everything." "Okay, she's ready." I feel everything." "You will," she said. "You'll feel it, but it won't hurt." My husband gripped my hand as they cut me open. He kept his face close to mine, speaking softly, comforting and encouraging me, clowning around like he couldn't breathe behind the mask until I begged, "Oh, don't make me laugh." It seemed to take a very long time. There was this weird tugging sensation, like the unzipping of a dress that's too tight. There was soft music playing. Harps, guitars, spa-type music. But I heard a liquid sound. Suction. The clinking of instruments. I felt them pull the baby out of me. "It's a boy!" I don't know how to describe the look on my husband's face. Pure joy. Pure love. Pure gratitude. I'd seen his face when he stood in front of a stadium filled with 48,000 screaming fans. I'd seen his face as he scored platinum albums and received the highest awards in his industry. I'd seen him experience the ecstasy of creative genius. None of that compared to the look I saw on his face in this moment, when he became a father. And then they held the baby up in the glare of those harsh lights. For a suspended second, I saw nothing but my son's beautiful soul. I heard nothing but his perfect silence. He made no sound. My heart called his name. Amir. The pure elation on my husband's face turned to pure terror. On the cold, white page of a medical text, Pfeiffer syndrome type 2 is a genetic disorder that causes skeletal and systemic abnormalities. Craniosynostosis is the premature fusing of the bones in the skull, sometimes resulting in cloverleaf skull, in which the eyes are located outside the sockets. Brachydactyly is the fusion of bones in the hands and feet, causing a webbed or paw-like appearance. Anal atresia is the absence of an anus, indicating life-threatening abnormalities in the colon and bowels. I learned all this later. I became fluent in a language I didn't want to speak. But in that first moment, I couldn't understand what I was seeing. It was as if we were at the center of a whirlpool, and the room around us was turning in on itself, contorting, twisting everything. There was only an instant of fear. In the next instant, we became parents. Our love for him embraced everything he was. And then, chaos. The OR nurses swooped in and took him. Everyone was talking at once. I heard my husband saying, "He's not crying. Why is he not crying?" He wasn't breathing. They whisked him to a table and began frantically working on him. Everything inside me said, let him go, but someone told me later that they were required by law to revive him. Suddenly, my husband's face was close to mine. He gripped my hand and said, it's gonna be okay. He'll be okay. Oh, God. Oh, God. We heard him cry. My husband disappeared for a moment. Then he was there again. It's a boy. It's a boy. They got him breathing. Let him go. No. No. We're gonna make it, okay? He'll be okay. They brought our baby over to us. He was curled on his side, gasping shallow little goldfish gulps of air. Because there was no lids to blink, his eyes looked startled and dry. I caught hold of his tiny hand, saying over and over, Mama loves you. Mama's here. I love you so much, Amir. Mama loves you. When they came to take him, my husband said, I'm going with him. Yes, yes, go. He left. The plastic surgeon came. Someone told me I might need a transfusion. I didn't want to be away from my son a moment longer than necessary. Please, I said, unless I'm gonna die, don't let them do it. There was talk about my mother giving blood, but I didn't want her to because I knew she was about to have surgery herself in a matter of days. I kept pleading, I need to be with my son. Please let me go to my son. Angela was there with her positive energy. You'll see him soon. First, we need to get you stabilized. Is he alive? Yes, Mayte. I'm giving you something for the pain. You're going to get a little sleepy. When I closed my eyes, I could feel the plastic surgeon dragging meticulous sutures through the skin on my belly. When I opened my eyes again, I was in the hospital room, and my husband was there, still in his scrubs. He looked so tired, so beaten down, but to me, he'd never been more beautiful. He was Amir's father, a protective papa bear thinking only of his son. From the first moment of our son's life to the last, my husband thought nothing of himself. His vanity, his ego, his needs. All that had been stripped away. All that remained was a solid core of unconditional love. My throat was dry. All I could say was, Amir. He's in surgery again. He described the procedures, one after another. They'd sewn his eyes shut, intubation, ventilation, feeding tube, colostomy, exploratory something. It was impossible to take it all in. They want you to pump milk so they can feed him. I want to come and nurse him. I don't want you to see him like this. I don't want you to see him till they get him stabilized so he can come home with us. He waited while I pumped and then took the bags of milk. I'm going back. I'll stay with him. I hit the button for the painkiller drip and closed my eyes again. When I woke up, Daddy was there. He said, he's beautiful. Don't worry. 2 days later, my husband briefly went home to take a shower. While he was gone, I had someone wheel me down to see my son. I could see that Amir was crying, but there was no noise, because they were feeding him my breast milk through a tube in his nose, and there was another tube down his throat for ventilation. I stood up from the wheelchair and pulled my IV with me over to the incubator. When I reached inside and took his hand, he immediately became calm, and I suddenly felt calm myself. I'd cherished this child when he was inside me, and then he had been ripped away. Pain, craziness, but now we were breathing the same air again, touching each other. I need to hold him, I said. Can I hold him without hurting him? They took me to a chair. There were so many needles and wires and tubes attached to every part of his body. It took 2 nurses to lift him into my arms. I'm here, Bebel. Mama loves you. I'm your mama. His skin was indescribably soft. The joints of his fingers were fused, so he couldn't grab my finger. But he found a way to fold his little hand around the side of mine, hanging on for dear life. My husband came. I worried that he'd be angry, but he wasn't. He sat on the floor with his body against my knee, humming and whispering to Amir, and we stayed that way for hours.
I was in pain and fighting to stay awake, but I didn't want to leave. Finally, the nurses gently insisted. They took the baby, and I let my husband wheel me to my room and help me into bed. Then he went back to be with Amir. There were more surgeries. He didn't want our son to be alone through any of it. Every day something new went wrong, or collapsed, or presented itself. Some new problem was discovered. Some existing problem got worse. We spent all the hours we could in our little family corner in the NICU, humming and telling stories, and taking in the softness of his skin and hair, the soft smell of his warm little body, the beauty of his spirit, the shape of his lower lip that was just like Jan's lower lip. After 6 days, he was struggling to breathe, and I said to the doctor, "He's not leaving here, is he?" He avoided answering my question. Instead, he talked about more invasive measures, including a tracheotomy. No, you're not doing that to him," I said. "He's suffering." He quietly explained to me that if we didn't allow him to insert this permanent pipe in Amir's throat, we were making the choice to let him go. And the more he talked on and on in this cold doctor way, the more hysterical I got. "You're torturing him. He can't live like this." My husband pulled me into the next room and tried to calm me down. Mayte, maybe if they do this, if they can get him breathing with the machine, then what? What else?" We stood there in the empty room, coming to the same terrible place. We have to let him go. I wanted to grab the words back as soon as they were out of my mouth. Letting him go meant carving a piece from each of our hearts. But now, I was a protective mama bear alongside the weary papa bear. I wasn't going to let anyone hurt my baby anymore, and I told myself that if we loved him enough to let him go, maybe he'd come back to us. Maybe he would find us, the way we found each other. Holding each other tight, we agreed. If they take him off the machine and he can breathe, we keep fighting. If he can't live without the machine, maybe he's not supposed to be here. We went back in and spoke quietly with the doctors. They tried to reassure and comfort us, tried to tell us this was the right thing to do. But the rightness of it didn't make it any less bitter. We signed papers and agreed on a time when life support would be removed the next day. They sent me home with painkillers and Valium, and I crawled into a dark sleep. I woke up every 3 hours during the night to pump breast milk, and I wanted to go to Amir, but I was terrified to go there again. When we did, it would be over. When I woke up again, I heard a phone ringing. A moment later, my husband came and said, "It's done. They took the tubes out." "What?" "No, I'm supposed to be there." "I didn't know if you could handle it." "I'm going right now. If no one wants to take me, I'll drive." He put his arms around me, made me stop. In less time than it would have taken me to get there, the phone rang again. He answered it, and then he hung up and said, "He's gone." I lost it. I went in our room and cried and cried. I don't know what my husband did. A few hours later, our son's ashes were brought to the house in an urn with 3 dolphins on it. Mama, Daddy, and baby. We spent most of the next day huddled together on the couch, crying, touching each other, expressing complete wonder at this beautiful creature who just drifted into our lives and then away again. I kept getting up to pump milk. "You should stop," he said. "I can't." My breast ached, heavy with milk. My hormones were screaming. Every fiber in my body craved the smell of my baby. I don't know how long I lay in bed with Amir's ashes. All I remember is the hot, hard pain in my breast and grief as airless and dark as the bottom of the ocean. Sometimes I was aware of my husband lying next to me or sitting in a chair, staring at the television. The next day, or maybe it was a few days or a week later, or in another lifetime, he came to me and said, "I can't be here. I have to go."
He went to play a few gigs and promote the Emancipation album. I stayed in the hollow house, wishing I could die. My breast felt raw. My nipples started to burn and chafe. The stitches on my belly felt like they were crawling with spiders. I lay on the bed, sweating from fever, shaking from shock and chills. I had an infection. A doctor came. I heard her talking to my husband. Their voices were quiet but tense. She needs to go back to the hospital. No, God's hand is on her. She'll be fine. If we don't take care of this, it could cause infertility. I sat up and said, I'm going. He didn't say anything else while I dragged myself up and pulled on pajama pants and a clean shirt. Will you come with me? I asked. He shook his head, staring straight ahead. In the hospital, they hooked me to another IV and pumped antibiotics and painkillers into me. The nurses came and put ice on me every 2 hours. They put salve and compresses on my breasts. After a few days, the pressure subsided, and the milk stopped seeping through the front of my hospital gown. I was sent home. I sat on the sofa with Mia, near the bookshelf that housed the dolphin urn that held Amir's ashes. The ashes were everything. Everything was ash. Where's my Vicodin? I asked. I don't know, he said. I'll send someone to get you some more. Days passed in the darkness. He shook me awake. Mayte, you have to get up. Why? Oprah's coming to Paisley. Today. She'll be here with her crew. No. Yes, you have to do this. You have to get up. Tell her I'm sick. Tell her I can't. I need you to do this. I told her you'd be with me. I can't. I can't. I can't. He had me on my feet, steering me toward the bathroom, but I was sobbing, stumbling. My body felt like it was made of quartz. People came. Lights were turned on. The mask of heavy makeup was applied to my face. A cream-colored suit was put on me. This must be what it feels like, I thought, when they pretty up a corpse in a funeral parlor. While I was being prepared, my husband took Oprah on a tour of Paisley Park, and her mission was clear. She'd come to find out if our child was dead or deformed like people were saying. And in retrospect, this would have been a good way to share the truth in a dignified way. Later on, with not much else to fall back on, the producers cut in screenshots of ugly tabloid headlines. Delivery room tragedy for Prince. Rockstar's baby has horrible birth defect. I think Oprah could have handled it better if we'd let her. God knows she tried, gently prodding my husband for some kind of information as he toured Paisley Park without me. In Studio B, he tried to steer her toward the album that had just dropped, but she said, Sex in the Summer, the song featuring the ultrasound heartbeat of your baby? Yeah, he said, and he smiled at the memory of that intensely happy day. What we did was take a microphone and place it on Mayte's stomach and move it around with the gel till we get the right sound, and he beatboxed the sound of Amir's chugging little heart. You know, you start to hear that, and then we put the drums around that. He played a little snippet from the cassette tape. That's the baby. When you heard that sound for the first time, she said, what did you think or feel inside yourself? I was pretty much speechless. It really grounds you, makes you realize that things you thought are important aren't really. While I was in the hospital, he had installed a lavishly equipped nursery and a playroom at Paisley Park. I hadn't seen it yet. In fact, I didn't know anything about that or the huge playground that had been installed outside. He wanted all this to be a surprise for me when we brought Amir home from the hospital. Oprah saw it before I did. I have to wonder why he took her in there. I suppose it's possible that on some level he wanted to tell her the truth, or at least hope she'd figure it out on her own, and understand why he didn't want to make a direct statement. They stood in the middle of this colorful paradise of toys and ramps and murals. It had everything a perfect nursery needs, except for the only thing a perfect nursery needs. Oh, wow, she said. Wow. Here's my favorite room. For the children to be, the children to come? He nodded with great certainty. Yes, ma'am. The child in you, or just the children? Oh, the children, yeah. "It's been rumored that your baby boy was born with health problems," said Oprah. "The reports have fans concerned." It was a tactful way to phrase it, respectful, compassionate. He just couldn't go there. "It's all good," he said woodenly. "Never mind what you hear." A journalist at heart, she finally asked him directly, "What's the status of your baby?" "Our family exists. We're just beginning it." A cryptic answer, but he wasn't lying. This is what we believed to be true. Believing that was the only thing keeping us going. I sat on a sofa at Paisley Park, smiling a pretty ballerina smile. Lights, camera. Oprah smiled too. We both knew our choreography. I sensed her frustration. She had a show to do, but I'd been instructed by my husband, say nothing about Amir. She asked about when we met, and my husband told her how he said to Rosie, "There's my future wife." That's such a good story, isn't it? I giggled and nodded and kept my eyes away from Oprah's. The woman is no fool. I was clearly no longer pregnant. There was no baby in my arms. The obvious questions seemed to hang in the air, but she was patient. She asked me how I had felt when we met. I felt calm. I felt at peace, I said, and I tried to feel that again in the moment with his arm like a steel safety rail behind my back. I was surprised to hear him say something about how we'd known each other in past lives, that I was his sister or possibly the same person. These were things I'd said to him while I was in his arms under hypnosis. "Isn't this all kind of weird?" Oprah said. I giggled and shrugged, thinking, "Girl, you don't even know." "Well, it depends on how you look at life," he said. She looked at me and said, "When he talks about you, there's a thing that happens in his eyes." I smiled and looked at my hands. My husband said, "I do feel like I've come closer to who I aspire to be by being with her." "Really?" said Oprah. "And what does she do for you that you didn't have alone?" "She makes it easier to talk to God." "Really?" "Yes." I could cry, she said. But I couldn't. If I'd let a single tear drop down my cheek, I would have dissolved like the woman in the Bible who turns to salt. I concentrated on my hands, my smile, my ballerina mask, while he told her about our small church wedding, how there was only a few people there, adding, she said she was happy it was empty because it left room for the angels. Another private moment, something I had said while I was under on our wedding night. Why would he give that little moment away? I felt it cost me something, just a penny or so, but something. "Is he romantic?" she asked me. I giggled and nodded. "He's romantic." I'm thinking, Oprah mugged, if he ain't romantic, who is? He's very romantic. Like, romantic how? She nudged. Like rose petals in the bed and... He smiled a teasing smile and started to raise his hand to my face the way he always did when he hypnotized me. I gracefully but firmly took hold of his wrist and brought his forearm down to my lap. Not that. I was not giving that away for a penny. Not today. We were here to do business, fine. Keep it about the business. I laughed lightly and said, "For me, the most romantic thing he's done is write all these beautiful songs for me." She raised her eyebrows, pleased that I was finally saying something. And maybe there was something I wanted to say. Maybe this was the moment to stop choking it down. Honestly, the whole thing is a foggy mess in my mind now. But maybe I wanted to offer him that opportunity without kicking through his need to control the information. "You know," I said, "let's have a baby. Because of that, I got pregnant." He smiled a tight smile. His lips clamped shut. After the interview, I left them at Paisley Park to do B-roll or whatever they were going to do. I didn't want to hear about it and never watched the show until much later. During part of it, he's wearing that Holy River bolero he wore at our wedding. He wore it for me, I understood later on, but at the time I didn't notice. I went home, took Amir's ashes away from the shelf, and crawled back in bed. I cried until I slept, and slept until I woke up crying. I remember staring at myself in the bathroom mirror. I didn't recognize my own skin. My eyes were the empty eyes of a plastic doll. In my hand was the bottle of Vicodin. I filled the glass with wine and tapped the pills into the palm of my hand. First 1, then 3, then the whole bottle. I studied them, planning how to swallow them all without the bitter taste making me vomit. I decided to move to the bedroom. I didn't know how long it would take. Better to lie down and not be found on the bathroom floor. I sat on the edge of the bed and raised my hand to my mouth. And suddenly Mia was there, pawing my bare leg, scratching me with her blunted claws. "Go away," I whispered. She yipped and spun in circles. She knew she wasn't allowed on the bed, but she wouldn't leave. She kept scratching at my knees and ankles. "Mia, no!" She wouldn't take no for an answer. Dancing with urgency, demanding to be noticed, she kept throwing herself on her back like she wanted me to pat her belly and pick her up. She insisted that I receive this love she was determined to give me. She pawed and licked and rubbed her face against me until I put the pills back in the bottle and sank down on the floor and held her, shaking like a leaf. She licked the tears streaming down my face and badgered me with affection until I was laughing and crying at the same time. When people ask me where my passion for animal rescue came from, I can trace it directly to this moment. Mia saved my life. If Mia hadn't been there, I wouldn't have been there the next day or the day after that, or months later when I finally started to feel like myself again, or years later when Gia finally found me. Amir's gift to me was motherhood. He taught me what a privilege it is to love someone more than you love yourself. He showed me that I was capable of sacrificing my own heart to protect my child. Amir made a mommy of me. That was his gift to Gia. So now you know what happened. To me, anyway. What happened to me and my son. I can't speak for my husband or describe what this experience was for him. I can only tell you what I observed through the haze of my own pain. Imagine a skydiver leaps from an airplane. He has the best equipment and does everything right. At first, there's euphoria. He sees so clearly. Blue sky, green earth, beauty without limit, a higher perspective. He has absolute faith that he'll land safely and be a better man than he was before. But it turns out his parachute is tangled. He struggles to fix it, but the chute tears away and disappears into the sky. Panic grabs him by the throat. But still, faith. He has faith. In free fall, he flails, trying to pray, but the force of gravity takes his breath away. He sees the hard ground coming at him, and he knows that if he survives this, he will never be the same.